High Commander Zixtal's normally steady tentacles trembled as he sealed the blast doors to his private quarters aboard the Galactic observation vessel Truth Seeker. The ship's artificial atmosphere felt unusually heavy tonight, though he knew it was just his anxiety playing tricks on his respiratory systems. All three of his hearts beat erratically as he slithered toward the quantum recording device mounted on his desk. The device hummed to life, its crystalline structure pulsing with soft purple light. Zixtal's iridescent scales reflected the glow, creating dancing patterns on the metallic walls of his chambers. He hadn't slept in what humans would call a week, and the fatigue was beginning to affect all 6 of his optical organs. But sleep was a luxury he could no longer afford. Not with what he knew. "Begin recording," he whispered, his translator automatically converting his subsonic frequencies into standard galactic common. Security level Omega. Authorization code. Zixtal Prime 773 Epsilon. The device chimed in acknowledgement, and a small holographic indicator appeared, showing that it was ready to capture what might be his final testimony. 200 cycles of distinguished military service, likely to end in disgrace. But he couldn't maintain his silence any longer. Not after what he'd witnessed in that human garage last week. "To the Supreme Council of the United Galactic Federation," he began, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades of accumulated dread. "I, High Commander Zixtal of the Observation Fleet, hereby submit my formal report regarding Earth and its inhabitants. What follows will likely be dismissed as the ravings of a commander who has spent too much time studying his subjects. Perhaps that's what I hope you'll believe. It would be more comforting than accepting the truth." He paused, reaching for a container of stabilizing minerals. His tentacles wrapped around the crystalline structure, absorbing the nutrients through his skin. Even this simple action reminded him of humanity's terrifying potential. They would have probably found a way to make these minerals into some sort of recreational beverage by now. 30 cycles ago, when we first discovered Earth, we followed standard protocols for emerging civilizations. We expected to find what we always found: a young species taking its first tentative steps into the galactic community. We prepared our usual package of carefully measured technological gifts, our diplomatic protocols, our cultural integration programs. Zixtal let out a sound that his species used to indicate bitter amusement. We thought we were being generous, benevolent. We had no idea we were like young hatchlings proudly showing a quantum physicist our first attempts at arithmetic. The commander slithered to his viewport, gazing out at the blue-green marble that had become both his obsession and his nightmare. Earth hung there, seemingly peaceful, completely belying the reality-bending chaos that its inhabitants casually wielded on a daily basis. Yesterday, in what they call Minneapolis, a young human named Kevin Matthews successfully weaponized dark matter in his garage. When our sensors detected the energy signature, I personally led the investigation team, expecting to find a catastrophic accident. Instead, we found him using it to, in his words, make the ultimate grilled cheese sandwich. Zixtal's upper tentacles curled in distress at the memory. When questioned about the fundamental impossibility of his achievement, he simply shrugged and said he'd seen something similar in what they call a sci-fi movie and thought it seemed pretty doable. He then offered to show us how he did it, as if he were teaching hatchlings a simple game. The commander turned back to the recording device, all 6 of his eyes focusing intensely on the pulsing crystal. This isn't an isolated incident. This isn't a fluke. This is just the latest example of why Earth cannot be classified as a normal developing civilization. They are something else entirely, something we've never encountered before. His voice dropped to almost a whisper, even though he knew his quarters were secure. They don't just break the rules of reality. Reality seems to break itself to accommodate their wishes. And the most terrifying part, they don't even realize how impossible their achievements are. To them, the universe's fundamental laws are more like polite suggestions. The recording crystal pulsed faster, matching his mounting anxiety. What follows in this report will sound impossible. It will contradict everything we know about physics, biology, and the natural order of the universe. But every word is true, and if we continue to treat humanity like just another species, we may not survive their ascension to full galactic citizenship. Zixtal straightened his posture, assuming the formal bearing that had served him through 2 centuries of military service. This is my confession. This is my warning. This is the truth about Earth. And it is terrifying. The recording crystal pulsed steadily as Zixtal's memories drifted back to that fateful day 30 cycles ago. The fleet had emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their ships arranging themselves in the time-honored display of celestial authority that had humbled countless emerging civilizations before. "We were so proud," Zixtal spoke into the recorder, his scales shifting to a deeper blue with embarrassment. 12 of our finest ships, each one representing 10,000 cycles of technological advancement, positioned themselves over what their nations called the United Nations building. We expected awe. We expected wonder. We definitely didn't expect Dr. Amanda Reynolds to be waiting for us with a cup of coffee and an improved version of our own cloaking technology. The commander's tentacles curled at the memory. The human woman had stood on the roof, her white lab coat fluttering in the breeze, looking completely unimpressed by their grand entrance. She'd waited for their diplomatic shuttle to land, taken a sip from her steaming mug, and said the words that would haunt Zixtal for decades. "Oh good, you're finally here. I was getting tired of reverse engineering stuff from that scout ship that crashed in my backyard." "We had no record of any crashed scout ships," Zixtal continued, his voice tight with remembered confusion. "Our databases showed no missing vessels in that sector. When we pressed her for details, she just laughed and said she'd found it 6 months ago while gardening. She'd been using our technology to, as she put it, optimize her morning coffee routine." The commander paused the recording for a moment, reaching for another stabilizing crystal. The memory of what happened next still made his chromatophores fluctuate wildly. Dr. Reynolds then proceeded to offer us upgrades to our supposedly superior ships. She'd noticed, she said, that our quantum field generators were a bit inefficient, and she'd sketched out some improvements while waiting for us to arrive. The improvements she suggested were mathematically impossible. We knew this. Our finest scientists had proven it thousands of cycles ago. Zixtal's scales rippled with agitation. She implemented the changes anyway. On her lunch break, using what she called duct tape and something she'd invented while trying to fix her microwave. The recording crystal captured his deep subsonic sigh. That was just the beginning. As our diplomatic team tried to proceed with the standard first contact protocols, we discovered that humans had already bypassed most of the technological benchmarks we were planning to graciously share with them. The commander pulled up a holographic display of his original mission briefing. We had prepared to show them the basics of quantum computing. They were already using it in their entertainment devices. We were going to introduce them to basic genetic modification. They had already rewritten their own DNA to glow in the dark because it looked cool. We were going to teach them about dimensional physics. They were using it to increase their apartment storage space. Zixtal's color shifted to the pale green of nausea as he recalled the briefing's conclusion. When we expressed our confusion about their rapid advancement, Dr. Reynolds just shrugged and said something that should have been our first warning. She said, "Yeah, we get bored easily. Borg humans tend to either invent something amazing or cause problems. Sometimes both." The commander's tentacles coiled tightly around his chair. We didn't understand then. We thought they were just unusually quick learners, perhaps blessed with some genetic quirk that accelerated their development. We had no idea that what we were witnessing wasn't just advancement. It was humanity casually rewriting the rules of reality because the existing ones were inconvenient. He turned back to the viewport, watching Earth's continents slowly rotate into view. That first day, Dr. Reynolds invited us to tour her laboratory. She said she wanted to show us some neat tricks she'd figure out. I remember one of my junior officers asking why she hadn't published her discoveries in their scientific journals. Her response chills me to this day. She said, "Oh, this is just the stuff I do for fun. You should see what happens when we actually try." The recording crystal flickered as Zixtal's voice dropped to a whisper. "That was 30 cycles ago. We're still seeing what happens when they try. And it terrifies me more with each passing day." The recording crystal hummed softly as Zixtal pulled up his personal observation logs. Each entry represented another crack in his understanding of what should be possible. He selected one particular file, marked with the highest priority classification. "The incident with Lieutenant James Cooper was when I first realized we weren't just dealing with rapid advancement." He spoke, his scales shifting to a deep purple of remembered anxiety. "Our scientists had explained that faster-than-light communication was impossible outside of paired quantum entanglement. Cooper found this inconvenient for, as he put it, texting his mom from deep space." Zixtal's tentacles twisted around each other as he recalled the events. He approached the problem with what humans call aggressive optimism. When our quantum physics experts explained the universal constants preventing such communication, Cooper wrote what he called a strongly worded email to physics itself. The truly terrifying part: 2 days later, he had a working prototype. The commander activated a holographic replay of Cooper's demonstration. The human stood there, casually holding what appeared to be a modified smartphone with various crystals and circuits attached haphazardly to its case. "Hey, Mom." Cooper's recorded voice rang out. "Yeah, I can hear you perfectly." "No, you're not on speaker. I'm actually calling you from the Andromeda observation post. About 2.5 million light-years away. Yeah, no roaming charges though. I fixed that too." Zixtal paused the replay, his chromatophores pulsing with distress. When our scientists demanded an explanation, Cooper just shrugged and said he'd had a chat with the quantum particles and convinced them to stop being weird about it. Our finest minds spent months studying his device. They still haven't figured out how it works, primarily because Cooper built half of it while sleepwalking and can't remember what he did. The commander pulled up another file, this one marked with a red warning glyph. Then there was the gravity incident with Dr. Rachel Martinez. She was frustrated with laboratory equipment constantly being affected by Earth's gravitational field. Instead of accounting for it in her calculations like any rational scientist, she decided to write a program that she claimed would ask gravity to take a coffee break in specific locations. His upper tentacles curled in remembered horror. The program worked. She created gravity null zones that could be turned on and off like light switches. When we pointed out that gravity was a fundamental force of the universe, not something that could be temporarily suspended, she just said, "Well, nobody told gravity that." She then proceeded to use these zones to create what she called a more convenient storage solution for her laboratory equipment. Zixtal shifted uncomfortably in his chair. But perhaps the most disturbing warning sign came from Professor Mark Thompson's quantum computing class. He was teaching undergraduates about quantum superposition. One student, apparently bored with the theoretical limitations being discussed, suggested they try to overclock quantum states. The commander's scales rippled with agitation. Thompson turned it into a class project. Within a week, his students had created what they called a quantum processor with attitude. It didn't just process quantum states, it somehow convinced quantum particles to recruit their parallel universe counterparts to help with the calculations. They received extra credit for, and I quote, "making the multiverse cooperate." He pulled up one final file, his tentacles trembling slightly. These weren't isolated incidents. Every day, humans across their planet were casually violating what we had thought were the immutable laws of reality. They called it innovation, or thinking outside the box. We called it impossible. The humans seemed to take that word as a personal challenge. The recording crystal pulsed steadily as Zixtal's voice dropped to a near whisper. The most terrifying part wasn't just what they could do. It was their reaction when told something couldn't be done. They didn't accept limitations. They treated universal constants as suggestions, and they did it all with a casualness that suggested they had no idea how reality was supposed to work. His scales shifted to the pale blue of profound realization. Perhaps that was their true power. They never learned what was impossible, so nothing was. The recording crystal flickered as Zixtal accessed his military archives. His scales shifted to a deep red of embarrassment as he pulled up the classified files from the 2042 Joint Military Exercise. The incident that had become infamous throughout the galaxy, though for very different reasons than anyone had expected. The war games were supposed to be a formality, he began, his voice tinged with what humans would recognize as rueful amusement. We had deployed our most advanced battle AI, the Tactical Combat Intelligence Mark VI, against a single human vessel, the U.S. Audacity, commanded by Captain Michael Torres. The AI had successfully predicted and countered strategies from 47 different alien species. It had never lost a simulation. Zixtal's tentacles curled around his command chair as he remembered the briefing. We gave them what we thought was an impossible scenario. The Audacity, alone, against our entire simulated fleet. The AI had calculated a 99.99% chance of victory within the first 10 minutes. Captain Torres just grinned and asked if he could play some music over the common frequency. The commander pulled up the battle logs, his chromatophores pulsing with renewed disbelief. What happened next still defies explanation. Torres began broadcasting something called Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley. Our AI, programmed to analyze all incoming transmissions for tactical information, became fixated on understanding the cultural context of what Torres called a Rickroll. A holographic display showed the battle formation dissolving into chaos. While the AI was attempting to process thousands of years of human meme evolution, Torres's crew executed what they called Operation Party Crash. They reprogrammed their ship's entertainment system to transmit dance music on frequencies that interfered with our targeting systems. The AI, trying to understand why humans would deliberately compromise their own communications for something called the sick beats, completely failed to notice the Audacity approaching in what Torres later described as the conga line of doom. Zixtal's scales rippled with a mix of horror and admiration. In 6 standard hours, the Audacity had disabled our entire simulated fleet. Their methods included, but were not limited to, converting their waste disposal unit into what they called a space glitter bomb, programming their ship's AI to challenge our AI to a dance-off, and somehow convincing our virtual crew that it was something called Casual Friday, and they should all take a break. The commander paused, reaching for another stabilizing crystal. When we demanded an explanation for these unorthodox tactics, Captain Torres simply shrugged and said, "Well, your AI thinks like a computer." So we gave it the equivalent of a brain freeze. His crew then proceeded to teach our shocked observers something called the Macarena, claiming it was a traditional victory celebration. A new hologram appeared, showing the after-action report. Our analysts spent months trying to understand their strategy. They couldn't. There was no strategy, at least not in any way we understood warfare. The humans had turned the entire exercise into what they called a party game, because, in Torres's words, winning is fun, but winning while dancing is better. Zixtal's tentacles moved restlessly as he continued. The truly disturbing part came during the official review. We discovered that none of the Audacity's tactics had been planned in advance. The entire crew had been, as they put it, improvising. When asked how they coordinated such complex maneuvers without prior preparation, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez told us, "We just vibed with it." The recording crystal pulsed faster as the commander's agitation grew. Our military theorists had to create an entirely new classification of warfare to describe human combat doctrine. They called it Chaos Pattern Alpha, the ability to achieve victory by being so unpredictable that even random chance couldn't explain their success. His scales shifted to the deep blue of profound realization. After the exercise, I overheard 2 human crew members discussing their victory. One asked if Torres had really planned all this in advance. The other laughed and said, "Nah, he just thought it would be funny to see if we could make an AI rage quit." They had turned one of the most sophisticated military simulations in the galaxy into what they called a prank video. Zixtal's voice carried the weight of his growing understanding. That was when I truly began to fear humanity's potential, not because they had defeated our best ally, but because they had done it while having fun. To them, the impossible wasn't just possible, it was entertainment. The recording crystal cast shifting shadows across Zixtal's quarters as he prepared to reveal what he considered the most disturbing aspect of his investigations. His scales had settled into a deep violet, indicating the gravity of his next revelation. After decades of observation, thousands of incidents, and countless sleepless cycles, I finally understood what made humans different, he began, his voice carrying an undertone of what might have been awe. It wasn't their technology. It wasn't their physical capabilities. It wasn't even their remarkable adaptability. It was something far more fundamental and far more terrifying. He activated a holographic display showing Dr. Rebecca Anderson's laboratory at the Quantum Possibilities Institute. Dr. Anderson's incident was what finally made everything clear. She had been working on teleportation theory, a field that every spacefaring race had eventually abandoned as impossible outside of quantum-paired particles. But she approached it differently. Instead of accepting known limitations, she simply asked, "What if those limitations are wrong?" Zixtal's tentacles moved in agitation as he recalled what happened next. On what humans call a Tuesday morning, Dr. Anderson was running late for lunch with her colleagues. She looked at her equations, which suggested a 1 in trillion chance of successful matter transmission, and said, and I quote from our surveillance records, "Well, that's not zero, and I really want that sandwich from the cafe across campus." The commander pulled up another holographic image, this one showing security footage from the lab. She proceeded to adjust her calculations using what she called optimistic rounding and lunch-motivated mathematics. When her graduate student pointed out that her modifications violated 3 fundamental laws of physics, she replied, "Yes, but have you tried their grilled cheese? It's worth bending reality a little." Zixtal's chromatophores pulsed rapidly as he played the next sequence. Dr. Anderson then proceeded to teleport herself across her laboratory, not because of any great scientific breakthrough, not because of advanced technology, but because she had somehow convinced reality that its rules were more like guidelines. When we interviewed her afterward, she seemed more concerned about whether the cafe had any tables available than the fact that she had just achieved what every other species had declared impossible. The recording crystal hummed as Zixtal pulled up his analysis files. This pattern repeated itself across every field of human endeavor. They didn't achieve the impossible through careful scientific advancement or technological innovation. They did it by simply imagining a different reality, and then somehow making that imagination real. He displayed a series of incident reports. Jack Williams redesigned faster-than-light engines because he was tired of long commutes. Maria Ramirez created a functional universal translator because she wanted to talk to her neighbor's cat. Robert Chen developed artificial gravity control because floating coffee cups are annoying. The commander's tentacles coiled tightly as he continued. Each of these achievements should have taken centuries of dedicated research. Instead, humans accomplished them through what they called creative problem-solving. But what was, in fact, reality bending to accommodate their desires? Zixtal's scales shifted to a pale green of disturbed realization. The most alarming aspect was their complete lack of awareness of their own power. When Dr. Anderson was asked how she had overcome the quantum uncertainty principle, she said she had asked the quantum particles nicely to make up their minds. She wasn't joking. Somehow, the particles had complied. He turned back to the viewport, watching Earth rotate slowly below. Every human carries this ability. Every child who dreams of flying might one day build a ship that defies known laws of aerodynamics. Every student who questions why things work a certain way might accidentally rewrite the underlying principles of the universe. They don't just think outside the box, they deny the existence of the box entirely. The recording crystal pulsed steadily as Zixtal's voice dropped to a whisper. This is the hidden truth about humanity. They are not bound by the same rules as the rest of us. Not because they break them, but because they simply imagine different rules, and the universe responds. They are not just another species discovering the secrets of reality. They are reality's editors, casually rewriting the cosmic code because the original version was inconvenient. His scales settled into a deep blue of resignation, and they have no idea of the power they wield. To them, it's just another Tuesday. The recording crystal flickered as Zixtal reached for what humans would recognize as a hazmat container. With careful movements, he extracted a small, sealed vial containing a dark liquid that seemed to shimmer with an unnatural energy. "This," he announced, his scales shifting to warning patterns of red and yellow, "is what humans call Lieutenant David Mitchell's special brew. Our biochemistry division has classified it as a Class 7 reality warping substance. But to humans, it's just Tuesday morning coffee." The commander's tentacles curled defensively as he examined the vial. Our first studies of human biochemistry revealed something disturbing. They had not only adapted to consume substances that should be lethal, they had turned them into productivity tools. Coffee was just the beginning, but it became our most urgent concern when Lieutenant Mitchell decided to improve the standard military recipe. Zixtal activated a holographic replay of the incident. Lieutenant Mitchell stood in what appeared to be a standard military break room, casually adding various substances to an industrial coffee maker. The timestamp showed 600 Earth Standard Time. Mitchell had already drawn our attention for his unusual relationship with stimulants. The commander continued. He had previously created what he called Energy Drink Version 2.0, which somehow caused consumers to temporarily perceive time at a different rate. But this new coffee experiment went far beyond that. The hologram showed Mitchell adding mysterious ingredients to his brew. When our scientists analyzed his recipe, they found he had somehow incorporated dark matter extract, quantum uncertainty particles, and what he called a hint of cinnamon for kick. The resulting substance violated several laws of thermodynamics just by existing. Zixtal's chromatophores pulsed rapidly as he recalled what happened next. During the mandatory safety review, Mitchell demonstrated his creation's effects by consuming an entire cup in one gulp. The results were unprecedented. He began phasing through solid matter while simultaneously existing in multiple quantum states. When asked about the obvious violation of physical laws, he simply replied, "Yeah, but my productivity is through the roof." The commander pulled up the official incident report. Mitchell proceeded to complete 3 days' worth of paperwork in 4 hours, while technically occupying 7 different dimensions. He filed reports that hadn't been written yet, organized files that didn't exist until next week, and somehow managed to alphabetize interdimensional folders. A new hologram appeared, showing Mitchell's supervisor's statement. According to Captain Jennifer Rodriguez, Mitchell had not only finished all his assigned tasks, but had also pre-completed the next month's work because, in his words, future me would appreciate the break. When our scientists insisted this was impossible, he offered to make them a cup so they could, quote, "stop worrying about linear time so much." Zixtal's tentacles moved in agitation as he continued. But the truly terrifying part wasn't the coffee's reality-bending properties. It was how quickly other humans adapted to it. Within a week, Mitchell's brew had become standard issue in his department. Personnel were casually sipping drinks that bent spacetime while discussing weekend plans. The recording crystal hummed as the commander pulled up medical scan data. Our xenobiologists were horrified to discover that human physiology was actually adapting to these impossible substances. Their cellular structure was evolving in real time to not just survive the exposure to reality-warping chemicals, but to thrive on them. One researcher described it as watching a species casually rewrite their own source code over morning breakfast. Zixtal held up the vial again, its contents seeming to shift and swirl of their own accord. We've seen species develop resistance to toxins before. We've seen evolutionary adaptations to extreme environments. But this was different. Humans weren't just surviving something that should kill them. They were turning it into a tool for enhanced performance. And they treated it with the same casualness as choosing a breakfast cereal. His scales settled into a pattern indicating deep concern. When we attempted to restrict access to the more reality-bending varieties of coffee, citing safety concerns, Mitchell just shrugged and said, "You know we'll just make something stronger, right? Monday mornings aren't going to defeat themselves." The commander's voice carried a note of resignation. That's when I realized every human attempt to make their lives more convenient was potentially rewriting the fundamental laws of the universe, and they were doing it before they'd even had their morning coffee. The recording crystal pulsed erratically as Zixtal's agitation peaked. His scales had taken on a pattern that, in his species, indicated extreme distress, a swirling mixture of deep purples and electric blues that seemed to chase each other across his skin. "What I'm about to describe," he began, all three of his hearts beating rapidly, "is the incident that forced me to break my silence. Our scientists had calculated that humans would need at least 500 years to develop reliable quantum consciousness transfer technology. Dr. Thomas Harrison proved them wrong in 20 days, and his reason for doing so was uniquely human." The commander activated a holographic replay of the event that would become known as the Tuesday Incident throughout the galactic scientific community. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m. Earth Standard Time. Dr. Harrison was conducting routine quantum consciousness experiments when one of our oversight committee members made what we thought was a harmless comment. Zixtal continued, his tentacles twisting anxiously. The committee member simply stated that consciousness transfer would remain impossible for at least 5 centuries, citing our most advanced predictive models. The hologram showed Harrison's immediate reaction, a raised eyebrow and what humans would recognize as a smirk. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He simply said, "That sounds like a challenge," and proceeded to reschedule all his meetings for the next 3 weeks. Zixtal pulled up the laboratory security feeds from the following days. What happened next defied all known laws of scientific advancement. Harrison didn't just work on the problem. He seemed to take personal offense at the very concept of impossibility. When his colleagues pointed out that his approaches violated fundamental laws of physics, he appeared to treat this as encouragement. The commander's chromatophores flickered rapidly as he displayed the progress logs. On day 3, Harrison successfully transferred his consciousness into a potted plant because, in his words, "I wanted to know what photosynthesis feels like." On day 7, he briefly uploaded himself into the laboratory's coffee maker to, as he put it, optimize the brewing temperature from the inside. A new hologram appeared, showing Harrison's notes. By day 12, he had developed what he called a consciousness Wi-Fi network that allowed him to simultaneously exist in multiple quantum states. When our scientists insisted this would cause irreparable damage to the space-time continuum, Harrison just laughed and said, "Nah, I asked space-time nicely, and it's cool with it." Zixtal's tentacles coiled tightly as he recalled the climax of the incident. On day 20, Harrison called an emergency meeting of the Oversight Committee. He appeared simultaneously in person and as 17 different quantum projections, each one occupying a slightly different reality phase. When asked how this was possible, he shrugged. All 18 versions of him shrugged simultaneously, and said, "The equations were being kind of rude about it. Someone had to say something." The recording crystal hummed ominously as the commander continued. But the truly terrifying part wasn't that he had achieved what we thought impossible. It wasn't even how quickly he had done it. It was his complete nonchalance about fundamentally altering the nature of consciousness and reality itself. Zixtal displayed the official report from that day. According to the documents, when asked about the profound implications of his discovery, Harrison said he was mainly concerned about using it to attend multiple meetings simultaneously so he could have longer lunch breaks. He had casually revolutionized our understanding of consciousness, reality, and quantum mechanics because he wanted more time to try different restaurants in his area. The commander's scales shifted to a deep, troubled blue. When our scientists asked for a detailed explanation of his breakthrough, Harrison provided a series of equations that appeared to be written in crayon on a takeout menu. The equations worked perfectly, despite violating 17 fundamental laws of physics. When questioned about this, he admitted he'd solved most of the problems while zoning out during a particularly boring staff meeting. Zixtal's voice carried the weight of his realization. That was when I understood. We weren't just dealing with rapid technological advancement or unusual problem-solving abilities. Humanity had developed a casual relationship with reality itself. They weren't advancing within the system. They were rewriting the system's source code, often without even realizing they were doing it. His chromatophores settled into a pattern of resigned acceptance, and they were doing it because someone had told them they couldn't. The recording crystal's light had dimmed to a soft pulse, matching the somber mood that had settled over Zixtal's quarters. The commander's scales had shifted to a deep, contemplative indigo as he prepared to deliver his final thoughts. To the Supreme Council of the United Galactic Federation, he began, his voice carrying the weight of his accumulated revelations. What I'm about to suggest will likely end my career, possibly my freedom, and certainly my reputation. But it must be said, humanity cannot be classified as a developing civilization. They are an emergent reality-bending phenomenon that we simply don't have a category for. He activated one final holographic display, showing a live feed from Earth. In a small laboratory in Denver, Emily Parker, a junior researcher, was casually manipulating quantum entanglement fields while eating a sandwich. As I record this, Ms. Parker has just discovered a method to, in her words, high five across parallel universes because she thought it might be fun during lunch break. She has already submitted the paperwork to classify it as a team-building exercise. Zixtal's tentacles moved in agitation. She's 24 Earth years old. She's been a researcher for 8 months. The equations she's using to breach dimensional barriers are written on a napkin with a pen she borrowed from the cafeteria. The commander pulled up a series of classified reports. In the past week alone, humans have developed a way to teach dolphins advanced calculus, invented a device that lets plants express opinions about their preferred fertilizers, and somehow managed to make a toaster that can predict tomorrow's weather with 100% accuracy. The toaster was an accident. They were trying to make it predict optimal bagel toasting times. Zixtal's chromatophores pulsed with urgency. But these achievements aren't the real issue. The truly terrifying aspect is that humans don't seem to understand, or worse, don't care, that what they're doing should be impossible. They treat fundamental laws of reality the way they treat social conventions, as helpful suggestions that can be politely ignored if they become inconvenient. He displayed a graph showing the exponential curve of human advancement. Our most advanced predictive models can't keep up with their rate of progress because they don't progress in any way we understand. They don't climb the ladder of technological advancement. They look at the ladder, decide it's too slow, and casually invent a teleporter instead. The recording crystal brightened as Zixtal rose from his chair, all 6 of his eyes fixed on the Earth rotating below. I've spent 3 decades studying them. I've watched them casually violate physical laws before their morning coffee. I've seen them solve millennium-old mathematical problems because they were bored during their lunch break. I've witnessed them achieve the impossible simply because no one had told them it was impossible. His scales rippled with a pattern that indicated both awe and terror. They are not bound by our understanding of reality because they never bothered to learn what they couldn't do. Every human child grows up believing they can change the world, and somehow, through sheer stubborn optimism, they do. Their imagination isn't limited by possibility because they treat possibility itself as negotiable. Zixtal's voice dropped to a near whisper. We thought we were helping them advance. We thought we were guiding a young species toward galactic citizenship, but we weren't teaching them. We were just giving them new ideas about what rules they could politely ask reality to reconsider. The commander straightened to his full height, his scales settling into a pattern of formal declaration. Therefore, I officially recommend that Earth be reclassified. not as a developing world, not as an advanced civilization, but as a naturally occurring reality distortion field powered by 7 billion entities who never learned they weren't supposed to be able to reshape the universe by asking nicely. He paused, watching as Emily Parker successfully high-fived herself across 12 parallel dimensions while taking a selfie. The humans have a saying, knowledge is power. But they've taught me something far more important and far more terrifying. The lack of knowledge about what you can't do. That's an even greater power. The recording crystal flared one final time as Zixtal delivered his closing words. This is my confession. This is my warning. And this is my recommendation. We should stop trying to teach humanity what's impossible. Because every time we do, they seem to take it as a personal challenge to make the impossible not just possible, but probably also available with a mobile app by next Tuesday.